Good evening, everybody. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As always, it's a great pleasure to see you all here. And I'm sure you're aware that tonight's lecture is part of a series that we're putting on the Emirates, which is actually also linked with a class that I'm teaching, a survey class, where I draw on the expertise of other people, rather shamelessly, but it's been rather inspiring and very full of insight for me. I'm very, very pleased today, following on from Tim Powers' lecture last week on the early history of the Emirates, the early Islamic history of the Emirates, to introduce my great friend and colleague, Dr. Khaled AlDhaheri, who I've met almost when I first came to Abu Dhabi, and he's been a great friend and teacher to me since I've arrived here. Khaled is currently a manager in the research and policy department, in one of the policy and research departments of the General Secretariat of the Executive Council. But I'm sure he would prefer tonight that I introduce him as the historian that he is. He did his schooling in Abu Dhabi and then went to Michigan to do his BA in political science and history, I think, in Michigan, is it? In Kalamazoo, it must be, yeah, which is, of course, well known to people especially who are interested in medieval history. And then he stayed on no, he didn't stay on in the United States, but he stayed on in an Anglophone country. He went to Exeter and did his PhD on the tribal history, on the history of the UAE, the recent tribal politics of the UAE, which is an interest that he maintains. He has various interests, research interests, including the development of the tribe in the modern day context. He's very interested in the Carmatians, the historical, political and economic development of the Carmatians, and tracking their presence in the region. You know, the Carmatians, of course, were the extreme, the heretical group that occupied the eastern Ahsa region, Bahrain, and made forays into the UAE in the 10th century. It's a very interesting history. In any case, there are other things I could list. Khaled also, I should say, before working for MOFRA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and now being at GSEC, was also had a very important role at AdAH a few years back. He's a voracious reader, and I feel like sharing this snippet with you all. A mutual friend of ours once spent an evening with him in his study, and they talked about various books. And there were various books on his desk, 14 books as it happens. My friend, actually, it suddenly dawned on him that Khaled was reading 14 books at the same time. So that's the kind of person he is. Please welcome Khaled AlDhaheri.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Philip has done me much good today, but I don't know if I am a historian. I am more a student of history. And in today's crowd, I can point 3 teachers, Ms. Frauke, her husband, and Dr. Mark Beach. All have had a role in teaching me at various times in my life. And in my PhD, it was Dr. Frauke who had a good and eminent hand in guiding me. Some of the works that will be presented here are shared and extrapolated from her and her husband's work and Dr. Mark. So it is to them that the basis of our knowledge is factored. In my lecture today, what I'll be trying to do is I'll be trying to look at the history of the UAE in whatever literary information we could gather, but in the same time, I'll also be looking at the oral history and how it interplays with this information as much as was possible to gather. When I first started searching for whatever information I could ever get for the first mention of Abu Dhabi or the first mention of this region, I have never found anything in the Arabic literature or in the Arabic output that ever related to this region. Before I get into the information that is displayed here, I found that the first Arabic work that was ever produced that mentions anything about this region was one of the 7 odes, the 7 great poetical odes that was hanged in the Kaaba. One of these odes were by the wandering exiled king, Amr al-Qais, where he mentions Baynuna. Baynuna is the region that is today considered in the western region. It is a site there, and for him to mention it means that there is continuum in the historical record, in the oral history, whether it is from his time till today. Therefore, when we began searching from that period on, there was nothing recorded. But I found something interesting in Mrs. Rosemary Saeed Zahlan's work. She has a book that is about the history of the UAE, and she mentions that the people of this region are the origins of the Phoenicians, and she cites Herodotus, the father of history, in the quotation that is found above. So in this quotation, he mentions that the Phoenicians first came from the Erythraean Sea, and the Erythraean Sea is this area. This area today is the Arabian Sea. It is called the Erythraean Sea because it corresponds to that area that is today named as well as Eritrea. However, if we wish to relate this to the folk history and to the information that is relevant today about the UAE history and the UAE people, we find that the Arabic Empire, the Arabic states, were always hesitant in the initial stages of its formation to wander into the sea. So, for example, the second Khalifa of the Islamic Empire, Khalifa Umar, was hesitant to allow a fleet to be created. The first fleet to be created was created under the first Umayyad dynasty, the first dynasty after the Khalifas, and it was established for the first naval invasion. However, when this is considered as the fact, the people of this region were still a maritime-based tradition and culture. When we look at the maritime and naval science output of the Arab and the Islamic world, they are almost restricted to 5 sources. One of them, or 3 of them, are called the 3 lions of the sea. The 4th is called Ahmad bin Majid, who comes from Jalfar, the north, and he cites himself as the 4th lion of the sea, considering his great input into this level. And the 5th source is the 2 brothers, the 2 Mahri brothers, they're called, and they're from Yemen. I wish to cite here a work by the Cultural Foundation that was previously, later became a Dutch, and now it's TCA, where they have produced a work that looks into the dictionary of the naval ships and naval works that are from Yemen. If we compare that with what is found today in the UAE, there is a 70% similarity. In this regard, I'm not saying that there is a direct link here, but I'm saying that there is a probability of a coincidence that is strong enough to establish the precedent mentioned by Rosemary and cited here by Herodotus. It is well known to all historians, however, that the Phoenicians, or the people who came from the Erythraean Sea, moved towards the Mediterranean and developed later into the great Carthaginian Empire. The Carthaginian Empire, as everyone knows, was a sea-based empire. It was then absorbed by the Roman state, and from the Carthaginian Wars, the Punic Wars, it developed its naval component. Therefore, this is one component that I trace when I look at the maritime history. I have to say, in these charts I cheated from my friend Dr. Mark. These are his works. He has worked for a very long time with the team that is mentioned there. It's the Abu Dhabi Marine Archaeological Survey, and they searched in this region looking for the archaeological remains. Here they looked at, of course, the mammoth tracks in Malaysia, which is the one on the right, and the one on the left, it is the ancient skeleton camel sites. What I just wish to relate here with regards to this slide is that this was continuously inhabited for a very long time. It was a lush environment which allows for people to live here. And in this regard as well, I will mention in the next slide Sir Benias and Delma and its significance. This is also something that has been worked on, the sites mentioned here by the archaeological segment, But here I wish to just cite your attention towards the region of Al-Ain and the western region. If we look at these two regions, these are the regions that have the most highest concentration of continued living from that day till today. And this means as well that it was continuously lived in. Today, whenever we ask our families and we cater and look into our oral history, we find that it is continuously inhabited. And it is from the 7000 BC to 1000. And in this regard as well, in relation to the maritime culture, the links of the civilization that is found here is linked to Babylonian civilization. There is a linkage there. It can be related to the maritime trade that was always established. And in this regard as well, the consideration of the western region. I wish to also take a consideration of the different diversity that are found in the various regions of Abu Dhabi. So Abu Dhabi today is divided into 3 geographic areas, 3 culturally derived areas. One is the oasis, the second is the desert, and the third is the sea. I've just placed there just one example in looking at the diversity. When we say the word, or we wish to say the word of the neighborhood in the oasis culture or the sea culture, it has a different name, and in the desert culture, it has another name. Although they are of one continuous standard and stance, still there are different names considered. It means, and it looks into the diversity of the regions here. This slide looks into the works of the great geographers of the Arabic and Islamic history. The 4 great workers, the great historians are Yaqut al-Hamawi, Ibn Kharduba, and al-Maqdisi. 4 of them are from the great geographers, and they looked at various sites found today in Abu Dhabi. And in this regard, I would like to go into each one of them with some detail. If we look at the first one, it is called Sabkha. Sabkha is this region here. When they first cited Sabkha, they cited this as the place that is between Bahrain, the great province that was always known for its oasis and its pure water, and Oman. And they also related that it was between Baynuna as well. Baynuna was always known to be this area in the middle. So here, Sabkha is what we relate today as Sabkhat Mati. And this was again related from the Abbasid era, which also looks into the depth of history here. Baynuna, as I have mentioned before, it is mentioned by the 2 historians Yaqut and Ibn Kharduba, and it is here as well. Mizar'a is one of the villages that is in the interior. It is here. And Mizar'a as well, it is a small village. It is not an extensively lived village. But in this regard as well, we also find that there is a continuation of the name from that historical time till today. When we look at Al-Jawa, Al-Jawa is this area here, and it is another name for Tu'am. Tu'am is today known as Al-Ain. Tu'am has been known in the Arabic historical works as the capital of the interior, while Suhar was known as the capital of the exterior. Yesterday in a discussion with Dr. Philip, he told me that Tu'am was considered to be somewhere in the coastal area, and that was due to some sources that were citing the Tu'am pearl. There is a pearl that is named under Tu'am. And it is named as such because Tu'am, or this city here, had such influence that it was able to reach the sphere of influence to the maritime location. If I wish to relate this to folk history, when I look at Tu'am, one of the religious judges who was in Al-Ain told me that Tu'am is called as such because it looks into the twin underground aqueducts, which is the Falaj system that I'll talk about later on. There are almost 7 that are live today, 8, and for each one there is a twin. That is why it was called Tu'am, which means the twins. This is one citation, but I don't know if this is wrong or right. When we look at Al-Ain as well, we have Hafit. Today it is called Jabal Hafit, and Habrir. This is also a mountain that is found in Al-Ain, or is mentioned to be close to Al-Ain, but its place is not known. The other site is Dhunnar, here. It is called today An-Nar as well. It is a place that has been as well excavated extensively by our old colleagues. Dr. Mark knows about it. However, the great geographical works mention that one of the tribes used to live in Dhul-Nar, and they are called Banu Harb. Today here we have a tribe in Abu Dhabi that's called Al-Maharba, and when you ask them, they relate that this was a place that they used to live in. Whether this is a correlation, once again, or true, I can only guess. Tarif is this area here. This as well has been mentioned by Yaqut al-Hamawi, and it also considers the area and its importance. I would like to cite your attention to Sir bin Iyas. Sir bin Iyas is particularly important because it had a monastery, and this monastery was from 600 AD. It was a Neustrian church, one of the eastern churches that was in this island. But if we consider the concept of the church, a monastery that was stationed there, it also considered the concept of tolerance, that the people of this region are accepting of others, and they still do so. The first ever mention of a European of this region is by the Venetian jeweler Gasparo Balbi in 1590. He mentions Sir bin Iyas, and he also mentions Jumeirah in his work. And he changes the name into Sir bin Iyas. Dibba is a place that I will talk about in a few minutes. Dibba is this area here. Dibba is the very important site of the great wars, the great Ridda wars. The first war is the first civil war of the Islamic State, but it is also the origin of the great Arab Muslim general Al-Muhallab ibn Abi Safra, who I will cite as well. Just in a few moments, I will be talking about two important individuals who have come in from this region and have affected the Arab and Islamic states and how they affected the world, and I'll also talk about the Falaj system. What I wish to show here is the regions of the UAE and how they impacted the world here. I would like to first cite the issue of Al-Muhallab. Al-Muhallab was a general who was first recruited by the second Khalifa, the Khalifa Umar, and he was recruited and first gained precedent in the first war here between the Arabic states and the Persian Empire in the Al-Qadisiyya war. Al-Muharrab showed his valor and his courage in this war, and he was established in Iraq and he was placed there. Now, why is Al-Muhallab important? It is because he is from the Azd Confederation. The Azd Confederation is a tribal confederation that today represents many segments of the tribes that we find today in the UAE. Al-Muhallab was then established in Al-Basra, and it was called Basrat Al-Muhallab, and it was always attributed to him. In this regard as well, there is also a river in Al-Basra at the time of the Umayyad state that was named on his name as well. Al-Muhallab was given to be the viceroy of Khorasan, and he was also given Central Asia because he was responsible for the campaigns, the great military campaigns that opened the ways of the Islamic armies in that area. I will not go into too much detail into Al-Muhallab, but I would just like to cite that from his sons and his grandsons, he was able, him and his dynasty, to be established as rulers of Africa. They were able to be established as rulers of Kyrgyzstan, Sindh, and these are the only areas. And in this regard, he was with the imperial state, which is the Abbasid and the Umayyad dynasties, but he was also with some of the members of his family with the rebellious states, whether they are, to those who know Arabic history, it is Abdullah ibn Zubair or the Al-Khawarij. So they supported all the states that were considered. The importance of Al-Muhallab and his family extended from the Khalifa's era right to after the Abbasid Empire. So this is more than 800 years of history of this one individual from this area who has contributed to the greater Middle East. I would like to also cite that there is an Arabic dessert, it's called Muhallabiyya. And Muhallabiyya, there was a Persian courtier who wanted to please Al-Muhallab. So he created this dessert, and Al-Muhallab was very pleased with it, and he asked him, what is the name of this dessert? He said, we named it in your honor, it is Al-Muhallabiyya. But he wasn't saying the truth, but anyway. He tried to gain his trust. This is looking at the Falaj system. And the Falaj is an underwater aqueduct system, and it looks at how the people of this region were able to use what little water they had to cultivate their palm trees. Now, the Department of Antiquities in Al Ain have done their research through the years, and they have discovered the following: that the oldest village is in Al Ain, and that is from the 5th century BC. From Al Ain, or from the UAE, they have passed to Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. And they were able to prove that because they were able to look at the age of each of these systems. Then they were able to expand into this blue zone, which is Armenia, Iraq, Afghanistan, China, and Egypt. They went into the other forms here in Japan, Vietnam, Morocco, and Spain. I don't know about Peru or these areas, but this is the claim they make. But in any sense, I would like to relate this back into folk history. There is an ancient Omani manuscript that states that King David flew in this region, and when he flew in this region, he was able to have 1,000 underground wells built in order to support the people here who are very poor. Now, in the people from Al Ain, they will know that one of the oldest one that is based on this history, which is 7th century BC, is called Ad-Dawoodi, the Dawoodi village. So how is this linked to that work is something that I cannot establish, but it does mention, or to me anyway, it does clear that this is oral history, always communicated. Whatever is written to record oral history. This is anyway what I consider. The people of this region dug sulfur mines in Jabal al-Dhanna, and in Jabal al-Dhanna they dug for more than 200 years of sulfur. The sulfur was used in order to cure some of the camels from some of the sores in their feet, but at the same time it was used to create bullets. And this was very interesting because it was out of self-sufficiency. But this again shows the ingenuity of some of the people who are here, because they did not stop at what they had at technology, but they tried to embrace the other and they tried to learn. And I'm just citing this again as a correlation that we have something called Tawazun today, which is responsible for bringing know-how from military industry, and today it creates bullets. But even in this creation, it is still a continuation of the past, or at least I see it in this way. When we look at the Barjil as well, the Barjil is this system here. It is a cooling system that was found around the region, and it was used quite a lot. We find this as well in Masdar. This is a modern depiction of how this is created. So it's very interesting to see the correlation that the people here believe that the past enriches them and becomes them, and in this case, they are able to still extrapolate from it what makes them richer. Allow me to look and present to you this diagram, which is explicitly from oral history and what I have been related to from my own research, complemented by some of the works that are present. This is the Abu Dhabi governance model in the pre-oil area. I cite this example because I would like to show that the model that we have today, the governance model that we have, is an organic model. It is a model that has been based on the tribal system, and it finds its place today established. In the first one here, this is taken by what is the judge prime or the paramount sheikh. When we look at the Arabic language, when we say the word sheikh, it is he who is gray-haired, and it is related to wisdom. I would like to relate this to folk history. One of the sheikhs was elected. His name was Sheikh Sa'id bin Tahnoon. He was elected because he was able to respond to a puzzle, a poetical puzzle, immediately while playing a traditional game. And in this, it was considered a mark of genius. The poetical puzzle and his response was one of those that was most eloquent, and in this regard, he was able to gain the admiration of those who are around him. Another of the folk tales related to this as well, Sheikh Zayed the Great, it has been mentioned, has never touched wealth or money or coins in his hands. Sheikh Zayed the Great is the grandfather of the past ruler of Abu Dhabi, and this again shows the mark of what it means to be the paramount sheikh. The tribal chiefs here are the tribal systems that are developed today. and they are the sheikhs and representatives, today the chief advisors. They would assist the ruler in making his decisions. We have this occupation that is today no longer found. It is that of the al-Muzakki. Al-Muzakki is the individual who goes to collect the taxes from Al-Ain, from the western region, and from Dalma. And Ms. Froka can correct me. Al-Ain and Dalma were considered more commercially viable than the western region. Al-Ain had a larger concentration of palm trees, and Dalma had water, something that it was able to sell. Al-Dhafra had the weakest output, but it had the greatest land swath. Taxes were taken from these three regions, and they were used for multiple purposes. One purpose is for security, another one is to help merchants to withhold or forego taxes from those who need them, but it was an established system of the economy of the state. We have the mufti or judge. This is the only word I found in English, but in Arabic it is mutawwa', the traditional religious man. I found some of the archived records. The man I mentioned, Abdullah bin Shayban, who Dr. Froka's husband know, one of his grandfathers was named as Mufti of Abu Dhabi, and that was in 1860 under the reign of Zayed the Great. So this family is still with us today, but it is very interesting to consider that such a concept was present. The division here is that they were found in Abu Dhabi, Al-Ain and Al-Dhafra, which means that they are also the collection of the highest concentration of people found. In Dalma, just one point is that Dalma had a seasonal market. Dalma was the economic center, it was the pearling center of the region. This is something that it does not have today due to the various conditions. When we look at the army, there was no such thing as an army, because all people who can hold arms will hold arms for the protection of the state. The state becomes the people and becomes them. The state represents its entire component. So there is no one who is established or paid for to do this job. It is a collective effort. Amir has been held for the last, in the 19th century by the two members of the Abu Falah family. So in Al-Ain, we have Sheikh Zaid, the last ruler, and his brother was in Al-Dhafra, Sheikh Hazza'. Now, with regards to representative, these are stable emirs. These are created as per requirement. So if we look at, for example, Das was the first oil terminal, the first place where oil production was created. Therefore, when importance was created, an emir was sent and a new government was created. When we look at Tarif, it was where we had the first camp of the British companies, and because it was a place of commercial viability and strategic importance, an emir was created there as well. Jabal al-Dhanna was where the first ships went. Markhiyah was the border area between Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia, and for that period, for strategic regions of aligning the border, they created an emir there as well. The diving court is something that is today no longer present, but it was in Dalma. The diving court that was in Dalma was supposed to represent the commercial interest of the sheikh in the pearling era, and to take and levy the taxes wherever present. If you would like today to try to fit this into the current government, it would be very interesting to see that there are many similarities, because again, this is something that is organic and it is representative of what we find today. For the personal guards of the judge prime and the tribal chiefs, they are paid by the Muzakki from the taxes that are levied from the Muzakki to the personal guard, and therefore once again, the judge is supposed to be, his main occupation is to use his wisdom in order to manage the system of the state. And today, again, we find that the judgment in this regard to be present. In an interview I made 2 years ago with the longest living elder from Al-Ain, he's called Musabbih AlDhaheri. He's 118 now. I asked him about one of the tribal sheikhs, and he was talking to me about Sheikh Khalifa, the grandfather of the ruler of Al-Ain, or the ruler's representative of Al-Ain. And I told him, what are the marks and qualities of leadership? And he told me that I remember some prayers and quotes of wisdom that was given to me by Khalifa at the time, and it was recorded at that period. But what it goes to show in that they had a mark different from others, an education that was different from others. This is a man who has attested to this fact. In my happiness and privilege that I have been able to talk to you very briefly today, I would like you to present me with the opportunity to show you a document which I don't believe many have seen. It is the first passport of His Highness Sheikh Khalifa, and it is by the political representative that was in the United Kingdom. This was when he was 4 years old, and his occupation is Sheikh's son. This is not found in official records, unfortunately. It was found in one of the sheikhs, tribal sheikhs, but again, this was collected in order for it not to be lost. I do apologize for taking your time today. I went very briefly, I hope very briefly, and I would like to take much more of your time, but I would like to leave the opportunity for questions to be directed if at all possible.
I'm wondering, have you spent time in your research studying any of the tribal migrations? The tribes, some of the tribes of Banias, like the Al-Manhali or the Al-Mansuri, who claim from conversations I've had to come via LA and the Liwa area, go back and spend a lot of time still in that area. But where did those tribes, how did they migrate through to come to even the Liwa area?
I just have to ask you backside that I can understand your question more. So one of the tribes that you mentioned is not from Banias, and that's the Manhali. The Manasir is allied in alliance with the Banias, and it is in the western region. But you're asking specifically the migrations,
Yeah.
the migrations of tribes.
Right. How have they come to collectively come to the Abu Dhabi area? From what areas?
I don't think that specifically you can gain an answer onto that. But what I can answer you is in the migrations that have happened in the interior, and that is due to economic reasons. If you just give me a moment, I'll bring the slide up. So the people of this region are divided into the semi-sedentary group. So those who are in the desert, but at the same time they work in the oasis or they go to the sea. So for example, when we talk about Al-Mazru'i clan or the Al-Mansuri clan, you will find that they have palm groves here, but they will also go to the sea in order to go with the fishermen there to fish for pearls or whatever the activities may be. So there is a constant migration from this region to this region. So this is one migration. Another migration is going from Abu Dhabi to Al-Ain. So the people of Abu Dhabi will go to the summer in Al-Ain, and again, they will bring their own items with them, their own produce with them, and they will exchange it with the people from Al-Ain. You will have the people of the oasis are the people who usually stay in their place. So the people from Al-Ain mostly stay here. They don't move about. But for example, from the western region, they do. From Delma, until it was or remained an economic activity center, it still remained. But the rest, they continuously moved. Now, if you look at the concept of a tribe in itself, it is that which continuously moves. The Manhali, for example, tribal system, the Al-Amri, you will find that they are in Al-Ain. They will also be found in Oman, but they will also be found in Yemen. And they move constantly about. Now, there are theories into how the Banias Confederation was created. And I mean, looking at the ancestor, who is Yas, some of them have looked at, for example, the great Bani Hilal tribal confederation. They related that they were part of this region. They proved this fact, or they proved this theory, because the Karamatians, as Dr. Philip was talking, when they conquered this region in the last period of the Abbasid Empire, they reached Al-Ain. This is found in a Omani manuscript that they conquered Al-Ain in itself, and they even mention Sinene and Hamasa regions that are very close to Al-Ain, and that there are cremations here. Now, the rulers of Bahrain, when they wanted to use the tribal elements to expel the cremations, they used the Bani Hilal, and the Bani Hilal were in this region altogether. A very old scholar who passed away as well, he's a poet, I just don't relate his name now, but he also mentioned that the Abu Falah family that we have today are related to the Bani Hilal as well. Whether Bani Hilal is a confederation linked directly to that, again, it is just a theory that you can espouse. But I hope that I've given some light in any way.
Just a clarification then. I have spent 3 years previously teaching in Banias in a school where almost half of the children were from the Al-Manhali tribe.
Yes.
Got to know the families, have been in the homes a lot. They talk about their migration. They talk about coming from the Liwa Al-Ain area, settling in the Qasr al-Hassan, and then this is just what I've been told, and I don't, and then being given land in the Banias area, and the tribe moved out to Banias.
Fine, so allow me to give another geographic description. We have in Abu Dhabi Island and in Al-Ain, 2 names that are usually recurrent. So you have the exterior, this is the area here, AlDhaheri, and then you have in Al-Ain, AlDhaheri, my name, and this is AlDhaheri here because it is the exterior. And then you have Al-Batin, which is the other side where the sea is next to the intercontinental, and you have Al-Batna that is here. Here you have specific tribes that are always there. Those who lived in Qasr al-Hassan are very well-known tribes, and they are from the Bani Yas Confederation. The Al-Manhali tribe, not to my knowledge, neither written or by folk history, have migrated here. They are usually in this area, but they have never come here, and they migrated and they placed. There are, of course, usually records of where they've been placed here. So, for example, the masjid here was owned by an individual, and then it was rebuilt under someone else. The other mosques as well here, that you can come and cite that this person was from this area or not. Of course, Dr. Froka can correct me, but there is a map if you go and see her book where she shows exactly where the Manhali are, and they're not there. But maybe there is a tale that has not been related to me.
I will just, not correct entirely, but I will just add maybe to the confusion. But why the Minhalis and some Rashidi and live in Banias is because Banias is a very new creation. It is a suburb of Abu Dhabi, which was built in the 70s. And now it is difficult to see, but when you went there, you could actually see houses were identical because they were built by the government, and they were handouts to the families who now live there. And of course, everybody has built on. And as you say, they feel that the ground belongs to them. But yes, they were given the houses. And these are people, the Manahil, Manhali, and some Awamir as well, but that's a different question. And then also the Rashidis were made welcome by Sheikh Zayed in the 70s. And they came from the region of the Hadramaut, between Hadramaut and some also between there and that end of Saudi Arabia, and also that end of Oman. And why did these people come to Abu Dhabi? Because at that time it was Hadramaut belonged to the People's Republic of South Yemen, which was pseudo-communist and not the best place for some people who, first of all, wanted to remain Muslim, and secondly, probably also could realize that in Abu Dhabi it was a much better life. It was developing, and Sheikh Zayed at that time was, every ruler throughout, particularly every tribal ruler wants to have many subjects, because in the distant past you needed the subjects because they fight for you, like Dr. Khaled has shown. There was no standing army. You needed your people to fight for you. So you needed more, and the more the better. So if these truly tribal people volunteered and happily came to live in Abu Dhabi, they were very welcome. And in due course, they were given nationality, passports, and they were given houses, and they live there now, and they're truly national. But it is a short history as far as tribal movements is concerned.
Just one small contribution going back to Menhali. If you look at this map actually, and where the green square is saying oasis and then desert, just at the bottom right hand corner, this southeast corner of Abu Dhabi is known as various names, but Zamul is one of the names, and it's the border there. You have actually Saudi Arabia
here
to the south, Oman to the east, so it's the bottom, the southeastmost tip of Abu Dhabi Emirate territory. Anyway, this area, we did some work there a few years ago and worked with the local people in this area. There are rangers in this area, and it's actually the area where they've released Arabian oryx. It's a reserve area. There are two very interesting interdunal areas in this area. One is called Khor al-Manahil, and the other one is called Karimat Khor al-Manahil, so named after al-Menhali, so exactly these people. And it's quite interesting that the area that was Menhali is near the corner, near the border between Oman, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, because as David Hurd can tell you, and who went there many years ago, the Zamul was marked with a kind of oil barrel and a stick before they had the proper border fences, and it was strategically a very important area because of actually water that stays in that area. So the Menhali actually, partly they had to move. I'm saying that where the connection comes with the 1970s and later the development of the housing in Bani Yas, actually, because you have border fences now put up between these areas, whereas the people would wander freely between Zamul and the territory that is Oman and Saudi Arabia. They would move with their camels actually crossways through this area. And
the name that you cited, I mean, when you look at the historical precedent or how old it may be, it will not go further than, let's say, 40 years. So yes, there is an area when you go from Al Ain to Abu Dhabi, it is, I think, Habsi or Hibshi or something of that nature, and it is related to a Yemeni who came to the area and set up a small coffee shop. And thank you. And people will go there and stop and say, we are going to go to this area and have our some tea or coffee in this coffee shop. And today, if you go to that area going from Abu Dhabi to Al Ain, it is named still under him. That doesn't mean that it is too far old, but it means that the people of this region were flexible enough and joyful maybe to find whatever name they can to pinpoint the area, since it was all sand, and they tried to find a few lampposts anyway.
In terms of the origins of the tribes, I'm wondering to what extent people now have a memory, whether it be a vibrant memory, a strong memory, or a very, very faint memory, of the fact that there's a basic dichotomy in the origins of the tribes, historically, going back to the early Islamic times and pre-Islamic times. That is to say that the origins of the tribes that came into this region of Southeast Arabia were either Qahtani, i.e. Yemeni, or Adnani, right, or from the north, right? So I'm sure that the answer to the question is no, people don't think about that all the time. But perhaps they do have a better sense of another dichotomy, which is much more important historically in the last 300 years, 200 years, of the Hinawi-Ghifari division, which is important for the whole region, and including the region that you're talking about. Because the Banu Yas were Hinawi, right?
Yes.
And others were Ghifari. So I was wondering if it's possible for you to explain whether there's any relevance to this division of Ghifari and Hinawi now to people and to the materials you've been talking about.
I don't know if I have the if I should mention it or not, but one of the things I did wherever I go to work is that whenever I would like to interview any new employee, and if he's a UAE national, I ask him a few questions. So one of the questions is, what do you know about the UAE prior to 1971? And I have asked almost 60 people. Only 2 have responded with an answer that is vaguely close to any reality. So if only 2 responded prior to 1971, yes, 5 out of 80 were able to name for me the 7 founders of the UAE. So I don't think they will know the Hinai or Ghafri confederations or the great tribal alliances. They are part of our history, true, but I don't think that it has any relevance. Even, for example, when you look at the concept of tribes today, right? So I mentioned the Bedouin, sedentary, and the oasis-based. There are things that differentiate each one of them, right? And these mark them even in geography. So yesterday, Doctor, we were talking about how the people of the region know when the border of the western region stops and when the border of this region starts, and that is from the different color of the sand, right? Even these particularities are forgotten, and it is forgotten, I believe, because today you have the development of the nation state, and with the development of the nation state, you have the concept of the citizen, and the concept of the citizen does not, or is a progression from the tribal concept in itself, and it moves forward. Abu Dhabi still finds its past being enriched. There are still individuals who search and who probe. I don't know how successful, I mean, people like me. I don't know how successful they are in their endeavors, but I don't think that they look for this dichotomy, or even if they are very much aware. I mean, I'm asking for basic information, as I told you, and I don't get it.
If there are no more questions, I'd like everyone to join me in thanking Dr. Khaled for a wonderful talk.